To acquire any skill, you need three things. You need action, so they got to go do it. And I would say do it in more of a live setting. They need struggle, and then you need patience. The struggle part sometimes makes coaches uncomfortable, right? Like, I want this to look really good. I think if you want your practices to look really good, it's more coach focused or centered than player centered.
Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it.
Today we are joined by the Director of Coach Development with Savvy Coaching, Mark Cascio. Coach Cascio has been coaching for 19 years at the high school and college levels. He has led his teams to 8 district titles, 5 Final Four appearances, and in 2012 became the youngest coach to win a state title in Louisiana. Coach Cascio's impact extends far beyond the court. He's been recognized for his innovative coaching methods and distinctive style of play. Since 2019, Coach Cascio has offered membership that includes courses, consulting, and community for like-minded coaches. He has recently teamed up with Tyler Costin and Savvy Coaching to help influence even more coaches, and you can go to savvyfree.com to learn how to join their free community. Also, make sure you listen to Coach Cascio's first appearance on the podcast in episode 52. Before we hear from Coach, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media at JAMODI Podcast.
The JAMODI podcast is powered by Sideline Interactive. Sideline Interactive is the leading manufacturer for high-quality, innovative scoring tables and LED video display boards that help coaches and schools bring more excitement to fans, create huge fundraising opportunities, and make their jobs easier. Visit sidelineinteractive.com to check out their amazing products.
Well, man, this is awesome. Thank you so much for coming on here again for round 2. You're the second person that I've been able to do this with. The first person was Tyler Costin. So I feel like I got the whole Savvy group right here, like coming on 2 times, but I'm really excited for this one, man.
I am too. I'm happy you reached out. I think it's been like 2 years since we did this.
Yeah, over 2 years.
How many episodes are you in?
Man, I have about 240 recorded, and I'm somewhere in the 200s right at the time when we're talking coming out. And you were around 50, I think, in that range. And I'll let you know this: you are, and for those that want to go back and listen, you're the most watched or listened to episode that I've ever done, and I don't think I've ever told you that. So you hold that spot, but Doug Novak is
he's creeping on me
now.
Well, I'm in good company.
That's right. He is creeping towards you aggressively. One coach said that offense is Joe Crispin said offense is supposed to be offensive. It's supposed to offend. We're attacking, and that's what Novak's doing to you right now.
That's right. He's on my heels, man. He's one of my mentors too. He's had a huge influence on how I coach, and especially on the offensive side of the ball. So if anybody's going to surpass me, I would gladly welcome it to be him. But
now we're going to have to stack. We'll stack this one, and then on top, so you'll have kind of a cumulative anyway.
There you go.
But no, you changed. A lot of things have changed for you over the last couple of years, sadly, or in a good way for me. Nothing has changed. I'm the exact same place. I'm in this same room and still doing this, trying to learn from coaches. Man, congrats on the change to Savvy. And I know you and I spoke over the phone about it, but how's that been for you?
It's been incredible. So was able to partner with Tyler Costin and basically do exactly a lot of what I was doing before. I would just say doing it at a higher level now. Tyler and I will kind of divide and conquer on some things. So we're kind of multiplying ourselves, but then every time we're able to work together, whether it's recording podcasts or running a 4-week cohort with our coaches in our community, or we go to a clinic, just anytime around Tyler, I'm learning. So it's great. And he's really, really good. One of the best teachers. So couldn't ask for somebody better to partner with.
Man, you nailed it right there. I think he's a phenomenal teacher, but so are you. So when I heard about that kind of partnership, marriage, whatever, incredible. Like it completely made sense to me. And because my thought was when I was dealing with Tyler with PGC, I would finish a summer thinking like, golly, we're in a really good place. I love the drills we're doing. I love the culture. I think The way we're running our sessions are awesome. And then 8 months go by and we meet again to talk about next summer. And he's got a brand new list of, hey, here's a way that we can be better. Let's not do that anymore. Let's do this. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, okay, hold on. I think it was pretty good. And it really challenged me in like my growth mindset, because I think we're so guilty of getting comfortable and not wanting to push our own boundaries. But he does that. And you did that for me on our call that we had years ago when you helped me put in flow. We still run a very basic version of it, but I think the basic version is pretty darn effective. And again, just an incredible partnership with you guys.
Yeah, I think you're right on with Tyler, and I appreciate the compliment there. I still remember our initial conversation. I want to say it was like I got off early at school or something, or I just gotten home, and I'm on like my exercise bike, I think, and we were talking offense. So was really glad that you reached out and have enjoyed our relationship ever since then. But with Tyler, he absolutely is a lifelong learner. He's always looking for ways to do things better, and I think something that a lot of coaches could apply, which he does for us in Savvy, is not afraid to try new things. And if he comes across a good idea, he's not, so emotionally attached to things that he's done in the past, whether it's terminology. Even when I joined, we had very similar philosophy on how we thought basketball should be taught and played, but maybe our terminology was different. And he would say, well, what do you call this? And I would, like for advantage basketball, he said advantage basketball. I said, well, I've heard it referred to as dominoes. We adapted that and really liked it. And he was like, okay, let's call it dominoes. He's just so willing to move. And I think the way his brain works is he's able to make really quick decisions and you get instant feedback. So does this work or not? Truly no until we try it. And I think a lot of coaches should be willing to embrace just more exploration and creativity in their coaching.
You just mentioned, I think, a huge piece of being emotionally attached. Coach, easier said than done to detach from that. So what's your advice to coaches?
Gosh, that's a great question. I would say this. Usually, and like you said, we get caught in doing things the way we've always done it. Usually the first time you've done something or the first way you do something is not the best way. And there was even times with me, we talked offense before. I'd be in a season and just be like, gosh, I think we figured this thing out. Like, I love the version of the offense that we're running right now. I don't foresee any changes. And then season ends and I come up with a couple ideas or steal a couple ideas or see some stuff just watching basketball. I'm like, oh, this is great. This worked perfect in what we do. So I think developing an eye for what fits you as far as your philosophy, what fits your style, whether it's style of play or just the way you coach. Yeah, just start somewhere and try. So for instance, something we talk a lot about with coaches that we consult with, and this would be an example of not being emotionally attached to the way you've done something, might be how you practice, right? I think an area of growth for a lot of coaches would be we focus too much on technique and we place too much emphasis and time on technique. Where what if we just could come up with one way where we start with less technique and you can always go backwards and teach technique if needed. So where I would offer a piece of advice to a coach is the next time you're teaching something, try to start on second base with it instead of first base and just see. Sometimes you might not need first base. You kind of teach them to the highest learner there. So if we're on second base and we see struggle, that's okay. Go back to first base. To acquire any skill, you need three things. You need action. So they got to go do it. And I would say do it in more of a live setting. They need struggle. And then you need patience. The struggle part sometimes makes coaches uncomfortable, right? Like, I want this to look really good. I think if you want your practices to look really good, it's more coach focused or centered than player centered. So that would be my advice. Long way to get there would be just try something new. And you can always go backwards if your players need it. If not, you've just got more efficient, you save some time, and I think you'll move a lot faster that way. And I think you'll have a lot more fun. Resist the urge to say, well, like, we have to do this stuff because, this is boring or this is a drill, but we just have to do it before we move on. I would just ask coaches to challenge that thinking.
I love that. Chris Hill from Jesuit High School here in DFW area made a great comment, I think, of starting every year off like it's brand new. And it makes sense. It's a new season, new team, new school year. Guys graduate, new freshmen come up, new guys come. But how often do we actually make an extension of the previous year? We're just moving practice plans over, copy and paste. We're flowing right from the spring through the summer to the fall, and there's no break or feel of evaluation. Like what did we do that we need to continue to do? What have we done that, man, is there a better way? But I think the idea of no matter if you even have, like we have a team that we have a lot of pieces returning and some skilled pieces added. And the feeling is for me, can we just push forward ahead? And maybe that's right. But the whole idea is this year's different from last. Whether offensively, defensively, what you want to do. I think the emotions tied to it is I've felt or seen so much success and fun from players in the past that let me just replicate that right now. John Beck, and to your other point of making things live, John Beck had a great point. He just said, whatever you do, add defense to it. Just add defense to it. So, Coach, and he said that, and then immediately went to 2 weeks ago when we're starting to put in our flow or those concepts and all right, alley, slice, 2-on-0. Let's Brunson get shots up. And if you were to walk in and look, you'd be like, okay, man, look, the organization's great. Like the technique looks pretty strong. But did we really get better? Did we get more comfortable? Did we struggle? And was my patience or the players' patience tested? Not at all. And so the guys like you, guys like John Beck and Tyler, yeah, they really do challenge most of us to get away from the things that just look good that we think have to be foundational pieces.
Yeah. We would always say reads first, technique second. So if I walked into a workout and the sole purpose for a player was just to get shots up, right? This is like a rest day or this is an additional workout. We don't want to physically tax this player, but we want a lot of block shooting. That's fine. What I would do, and when I do work, and when I was at the college level and was working with my players outside of practice, and the goal was to get block shooting or just a lot of volume shooting, we would do that, but I would just have a hint of a read out there. So I would tell the player, let's work on shooting off a ball screen when defense goes under, right? And I would say, all right, I'm going to set the ball screen for you. I want you to come off, and I don't like doing this, but like picture the defense going under, right? There's no read here, but I would say come off and shoot. But if I step towards you or if I put a hand up and take away your room, then you need to drive it. And of 10 reps, I would probably give them 8 or 9 shots, but just having that in the back of their mind of I'm coming off this ball screen and I don't know if this is going to be a shot or not. It just turns that knob a little bit away from just mindless shooting, where now it's just a tad bit more game-like. Could we make it even better? Absolutely, but that's not the purpose of the workout. So I'm actually not against just, block practice. I just think you can make it a tiny bit more variable. And then, I said reads first, technique second. I'm a big believer that get your teams to play hard, play tough, whatever that is for you, before you do anything technique. And I think that's backwards of probably the way we were brought up in basketball, right? Is your first few days like, oh, we don't even need a basketball because it's all technique based. I use this example a lot. In fact, I was visiting with a coaching staff this past weekend. I used this one. Would you rather a help defender that is almost always in position and almost always helps when they're supposed to, but they lack a little technique, right? Maybe their hands aren't in the right spot. Maybe they foul a little bit too much. Maybe they could move their feet better and help, whatever it is. Would you rather that player or a player that has really good technique in their help? Their hands are always in the right spot. Their feet are always moving, but they're rarely on time or they're rarely in position for help. I think we'd all rather the first player because we have all year to coach the technique and get them ready for March. So that's what we mean by reads first, technique second. Yeah, so I could go on and on about that, but I think that would be biggest piece of advice I could give a coach, like just kind of jump in and try new things and be creative. And I think it'll transform your coaching and your team as well.
What do you think is the danger of the volume shooting or even kind of patterns? So I think a very popular thing, if you follow some skill coaches that are out there right now, is they are moving around. They're not just shooting the same shot over and over. They're getting different looks from different spots, all different types of footwork, but it is just a pattern. And I guess maybe sometimes I see that there is some type of game element of make 5 out of 6, something that adds a little bit of pressure to make it a little bit more real. But what is the danger of the volume or in patterns that kind of turns their brains off?
Yeah, really good question. I like this one. I'll even start with the end there of make 5 of 6. Having something on the line is dialing that knob up just a little bit, right? We'll never make practice fully representative of the game because we're likely not going to have officials. We're not going to have girlfriend, boyfriend, mom, dad.
Girlfriend's not sitting over there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's not this element of, gosh, I feel like if I turn it over again, coach is going to take me out. And what if I don't get back in, right? We'll never be able to simulate that, but we can, like I said, just turn that knob a little bit. So adding some kind of time element or make X amount of shots, that does dial it up a little bit. Here's where I would be fearful of in those block or volume shooting practice or those pattern shootings is, are we mistaking technique for skill? Skill is knowing when to apply your skill and technique. So basically being in the right place, right time to be able to make that play. Think of this as a flow chart here for any skill or action in basketball. First, we have to see it, then we decide, and then we apply the skill or the technique. I think a lot of coaches will focus just on the technique. So if I walked into this gym and this workout that we're kind of simulating here, and it was all, you said different footwork or different shots, if they take those shots out of the offense, awesome. But are we so focused on technique that they don't know when they should be taking those shots? So I would, that's the danger in your trainers that are using a lot of cones, a lot of chairs, is we're lacking all game context. So if we're maybe coming off a screen and we're curling for a shot, okay, well, when do I curl, right? Could we just, like you said, could we just add one defender and just give them an either or? So based on how the defense is playing, you're either going to curl or flare this. If we get a flare first, maybe we curl right after that. That's the pattern, right? Or if we get the curl first, that's the read. Let's get a read shot. And then after we curl, let's get a flare shot. So one is automated, one is a read. That way, at least we're adding game context where they know when they're going to use that. But yeah, so the danger is thinking that technique is skill. Technique is part of a skill. So the equation is technique plus game context. Your vision and decision is skill. So vision precedes decision. Decision precedes skill.
Say that again.
So vision precedes decision. So what you see is going to determine your decision, right? So if I'm coming off this screen, all right, I see defense or I feel defense locking and trailing. Defender's on my hip, so I'm going to curl this, right? I've got to see I got to know what to look for. I can't just look at the ball. I've got to be able to see my defender. My vision, what I see, is going to determine my decision. So I'm deciding to curl, and because I'm curling, now I can use the footwork and the technique that I've been taught by my trainer or my coach. But if we're not training the eyes, I think that's where we get into trouble, where if players don't know when to use the skill, then it actually has no value, right? I've coached really good shooters that struggled with shot selection. So and I think we've all probably coached those shooters or coached those players and this player's a really, really good shooter, but he needs to shoot more. Like he's passing up shots, right? Or a player that's a really good shooter and he's shooting a lot of tough shots.
Coaches, the JAMODI podcast is powered by Scoreboard Media. Scoreboard Media works with high schools across the country to run professional sponsorship programs on their LED scoreboards. Whether you already have LED and you just want to supercharge the revenue, or you want to use sponsorship revenue to buy new LED video scoreboards, Scoreboard Media can help. They work with sponsors and advertisers locally, regionally, and nationally who want to connect with your school's community. Email info@scoreboardmedia.com to start the conversation and see what's possible.
That's the part of shot selection people don't talk about very much, is good shooters passing up shots. And I actually think that's more common than when we talk about players struggling with shot selection. Some coaches automatically go to, they're shooting sixes or contested shots all the time or double step backs. No, I think within your offense, there are way more open opportunities, especially when they leather first touches their fingertips, that either we're not training them to see that and go, or we're not allowing it because we want 5 or 6 more actions to develop before we get to that scoring opportunity.
Yeah, I've had to tell, so you're familiar with flow or driving space, which we run. And so a principle is we pass through single gaps, we drive through double and triple gaps. I've had to tell my better drivers, like, you're not allowed to pass through a single gap. Like, we need you attacking the big gaps almost every single time. Because if you don't, that means you're putting a lesser driver or a lesser skilled driver in that same situation. So same thing, right? I know Duncan Robinson, when he was on his two-way, maybe in the G League, Spoelstra said, I'm not calling you up until you can get at least 12 threes off a game. I think he was shooting like 2 a game or something. So yeah, he had to learn how to get his shots off and make those reads. And he's really fun to watch as far as how he creates shots and reads. The Heat are really fun to watch how they play off the get game stuff. And so that was his area of growth. And like, we're kind of talking player development here, I'll throw this in. Savvy, SAVI, is the identity piece. One thing we help our coaches do and the players that we work with is every player should know the next part of their development. So for Duncan Robinson, it's, man, you're a really good shooter. Now the next part of your development of your game that we need to build is the ability to get more shots off. So for me, the other player that I referenced was, all right, the next thing we need you to do is just attack more. Like, that's it, right? And just that becomes their KPI or just the next part of their development. So since we were talking player development, I figured I'd throw that in because that's something that is so huge as far as players. Can they have a vision of where they're going and who they can be? And oftentimes just identifying one thing.
The problem with that I immediately go to is, as a coach, do I have the vision? Do I know what they do really well and what they can improve on that will fit into our style of play and connect to that player? Because not every player is the same, and not everybody does. Even in a free-flowing offense, it's amazing to me the fear that I've felt from coaches over the years of kind of going over to that style of play of, what if the wrong guy takes the shot? What if the wrong guy has the ball in his hands more often? And man, I've just seen the opposite. Even without telling them and without joysticking what they need to do, the ball seems to find, there's a hierarchy that develops. It finds the best shooters the most. The better playmakers find those gaps the most. And so it works out that way. But making sure that we know what a player needs to go to. And that's the part of maybe that growth mindset of listening to people like you, researching things, not being emotionally tied to what we've done in the past, so that I'm making sure I'm the best for them.
Yeah. I actually had this question recently of how do I know my best players are going to get the most shots? My answer is the exact same what you said. I could probably just copy and paste what you said. Is like, the ball finds your best players the most. And when they have the ball, they can do more with it. So it's automatically going to get more opportunities, right? If I have a triple gap and I'm the best player on the floor, the best player on my team, well, I'm going to create more advantages, right? So I'm either going to drive in for a 9 or drive to draw 2, and then now we're in dominoes. And I will say this, if you're truly worried about, let's say your best player is your racker, and you're really worried about the ball coming back to them, I would look at our shot selection. Are we taking suspect shots before it comes back? And I think the way your team shares the ball and your shot selection, so your passing and shooting, is a direct correlation of your culture. There you go. We had a really, really strong culture. So a lot of, like, right now, we're doing a 4-week dive into the drive and space offense. So every Tuesday night, Tyler and I are on Google Meet, and all of our Grow members can attend live and ask questions, and we present content on drive and space this month. And a lot of the coaches are asking, well, gosh, like your team moves the ball so well. What drills do you do to get them to do that? And it's a mixture of drills, games, but also a big part of it is the culture piece as well. So we never really had to worry about our shot selection or the best players getting those touches once we fixed our culture. Not to say I've always had it figured out, still don't have it figured out. Once I made the true investment into being a transformational coach and building our culture, everything else becomes so much easier. Like even get them to buy into the defensive end or whatever is important to you. And then you said something that was really good too, is like, does the coach know the next part for their players' development? One note that I put, and this kind of goes with culture, so I think it fits here, is I think culture should be shared. So that we should build towards a mix of a coach-led / player-led program. You hear player-led program. I don't think a program should be 100% player-led, right? Coaches get paychecks too, right? But there should be a really nice blend. So here's a practical tip or application for coaches that are listening as far as what does your player need next? What I did every Sunday, I just had a list of our roster 1 through 24, JV varsity. Next to each player's name, I just wrote down what they needed that week. Sometimes it was Matt needs extra shots. Mark needs extra Barclays. But other times it's so-and-so needs confidence. And that might just be a 1-minute conversation of how can we build confidence? How can we give them confidence? I would come up, that would be coach-led, right? Like this is me, the coach, identifying something I think they need or the next part of their game. I would ask them what they think too. And that gives you 2 things. And that could be, all right, so in your pre-practice routine, give me 5 reps of Barclays, and then you've got the rest of the time to work on what you think you need. And even if it's not what we think, at least we know what they're thinking about, right? Like let's say it's this guy let's go back to this player that's a really good shooter that doesn't shoot enough. Maybe he's saying like, coach, I think I need to work on my passing or my assist. And you're like, no. Well, okay. But first, let's make sure that you're not open, right? And when you're open, you're shooting. And then when you're not open, we can work on your assist or break it down that way.
Coach, there's so many good things that I've made some notes so that I can hit some points, because I feel you're one of those guys that you'll probably rattle off 4 or 5 things in a row that we could go down. I just recently read a little bit about life-changing or uplifting communication that we can give, and there's a really simple change. So like in that scenario where the player's like, I really want to work on my passing, I think so often I would say, hey, that's good, but what about this too? The but, instead of the but, say now. So it's, yeah, that's really good. Now, let's also do this. The now makes it seem like to him that I'm right on board with what he's thinking, even though it is passing against the wall, and I don't really care about that. But the now will connect it and not shut him down and make him actually feel like he's a part of it. I think the way that we communicate what we want them to do is huge. And that little change from but to now, I think you'll like this too. And I'm going to jump real quick to something else, but just had an awesome talk, or had a few months ago, but put it out with Greg Campy. And we were talking about the run that they had, but also talking about Golke, right?
I don't know.
Shooter, the guy that went off.
Yeah.
So I froze for a second, but I think but talking about him and talking about he's a good shooter, but he's like, Matt, we've had great shooters. We've had guys he had one guy shoot 242 threes in a year and 0 twos. He says the first time ever in college basketball that it's a D1 basketball it's happened. And he's like, so this isn't something like new. We just found him and we've been playing this way. And he's like, you know what I really get excited with shooters? And I kind of leaned in a little. And he said, when they go 1 for 12. And I kind of take a pause. I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, if they're willing to shoot 12 and only make 1, that tells me a lot about who they are as a shooter. He said, you know who I don't really care about is the 1 for 4 guys or the 1 for 5 guys. He said, because then they didn't have the courage to continue. I may have added courage, but they didn't have the ability to continue to look for or hunt their shots after they missed a couple because they don't feel like it's their night. I just thought that was such a cool idea in building shooters' confidence or giving more courage to your players. It's that Duncan Robinson story of, guys, I don't care. It's what Doug Novak said. I don't care if you make it. You have to take it. Like, you have to take the open ones. But the ability, I told my stepson this a year ago when he got to be a junior, and his offensive position, or the importance, or I guess, or maybe how much he was carrying on his shoulders was going to increase the role. There's. And I said, buddy, you got to get to where you shoot 10 to 15 a game. You're going from 2 to 3 a game. And the biggest thing is going to be the war inside your mind. But I love that. Like, for us as coaches, do we have any of those guys that, man, they can shoot now? Not little Timmy continue to shoot step back threes at half court. Within our shot selection scale, do they continue to shoot 10 to 12? I think that's big time.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned shot selection scale, because if they're good shots or great shots, keep shooting, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think, as the coach, we first set that example. You mentioned the word courage, which I love, is like, they're going to get that courage from you. If you're not attached to outcomes and you're going to teach them not to, a lot of coaches, a lot of players, they result, right? Like, we missed that, so that was not a good shot. Or how many times have a player takes a suspect shot and it's like, no, and it goes in. It's like, all right, yeah, good shot. Like, ooh, thank goodness. It's like, no, not a good shot. And here's the thing. I think as a coach, you got to be really intentional. When that happened at practice, I would stop it and say, wait a second. Did we think it was a good shot before it left my hands? Like, no. Okay. Well, because it went in, that doesn't make it a good shot, right? It makes it it went in, which we like the result, but we don't want to take 60 of those a game.
That's
so
right.
we teach NATO, not attached to outcomes, as the acronym, which is so important. So that, when your player goes 1 for 12, I agree. Like, I think they're showing a tremendous amount of courage, and they figured out that if I'm taking these shots in room, in range, in rhythm, it doesn't matter how many I've missed. I'm going to make the next one. I'm not attached to the outcome. It's not going to affect my confidence. And that's my role on this team. So, like you said, like, we need you to continue to take those shots.
I've always wanted to be a game show host. I think I could manipulate my voice in a way, is it a 7? Like, that wasn't real. I could bring it more than that. But we play a game at Faith, and it's called Is It a 7? And I like to do it during film. And I take 5 or 6 shots, and from all types of players. And right when it releases their hand, like, right, it's a foot away, I pause it and we play, is it a 7? And guys raise their hand, 7 being a wide open jump shot within their range. PGC shooting scale, I've used it for years. I told coaches it's the single greatest thing next to flow that I've added. But really, and okay, I want to go back to another thing you said in a second, but we have them rate that shot. And the fun thing is you got to really teach the difference between a 6 and a 7, and how those lines can blur, and how the faster preparation and the faster you train, the more that you're allowed to technically take 6s. And we want to have the trained eye. To the untrained eye, those are contested jump shots. But to the trained eye, and you teach your players this, and I teach myself this, to where I don't get frustrated with what appears to be a 6, because if I actually pause it, the ball's out of his hand at the time that the hand gets in his vision. So he could punch me in the face at that point. The shot's done. It's over. So faster preparation, and not just more makes, but you demonstrate that you can take those, and you're willing, and over time, the percentages says that you make it, even though I just said something I don't really value as percentage, but if they can do that, and in our shooting games, it does show over time, I'm okay with it. So we played that, and it's amazing how I'll take the clips that it's for sure a 7, and they miss at the end, and we have to teach each other that it's a great possession. The goal of the possession isn't to score. The goal of possession is to get the best shot as fast as possible. And fellas, you know what the best shot is. So we're going to stand for every 7 that we take. Not just makes. That's not special. We're going to celebrate to where people will leave the gym, go, what is up with them? They were happy about every miss. Well, we were happy about the makes too. But coach, the 2 things, and this is, I don't know where I got this from, but maybe it's just having enough of these talks over the years where culture comes up a ton, and I'm all for great words. I'm all for, if you have posters, if you have things on shirts, that's fine. But your culture is tested and you find out really what it is, how you deal with shot selection and how you deal with losing games. Those two things tell me really what your culture is, not what just your slogan is or your breakout is or your hashtag is on social media. I don't give a crap about that. How do you deal with your best shooter or a guy that's allowed to shoot open shots missing in a timeout? Do you say, guys, if you make more shots, we'll be fine? Well, no crap like that. Anytime I hear somebody say that, I'd almost just want to be like, playing coach, like not really coaching, playing coach. I've played coach before. And I think, but then how you deal with losing, and Tyler helped me with that years ago by eliminating post-game talks. But how you deal with those two things, Coach, that's your culture, in my opinion.
Yeah, man, you said so many good things. I took like a page of notes as you were writing, so I want to go over a couple of things because we're speaking the same language, which is great. So we did the same thing with film. Like, is it a 7? We had our players rate the shot, right, according to the shot scale, and I would actually pause it before it hit the rim. That way they couldn't be. So you're doing it right on the release. I went a little bit longer just so they got a look. Same thing though, and the first time we did it, the players were like waiting on we didn't see if it went in or not. And like, that's not the point, you know? So, and then you said trained eye, and we say the same thing. We talk about like, what lens are we looking through? I love the film, and I have a cut up where it pauses and all that. So if any coach wants the film that I use, they want to use it with their team, reach out, I'll send it to you. The goal is really, there's going to be some gray area. You said between a 6 or a 7, right? As long as we all agree on what a 6 is, what a 7 is, we get questions on the shot scale because we use the same one and we've adapted it a little bit. But I would say whatever makes sense to you as the coach, feel free to tweak it. Common sense should prevail. And during practice, we would play a lot of different games as far as like, if you take a 9 or a 7, you get to keep it, right? Whether you make it or not. So we're not attached to the outcome that way, but also just measuring those things throughout practice. If you find your team taking suspect so shots, just stop and say, hey guys, on a scale of 1 thumbs down, 2 thumbs to the side, 3 thumbs up, what would we say about our shot selection? And if you don't have consensus, that means it's not clear, right? Or, hey, is it a 7? That's my game show voice. How am I doing? Is that okay?
Good.
Okay, I'll work on it.
Maybe about in voice, no doubt.
Maybe we'll have our game show voice down. So let's say you take a shot, and I say, is it a 7? And half the team says yes, some are undecided, some say no, doesn't matter. Even if 80% say yes, some are saying no, we don't have consensus, which means it may not have been a 7, right? Or those few players, I would say, okay, well, what defines a 7? What are some characteristics of a 7? And maybe their definition is off, right? And that is a way where we can just continue to shape our lens. That way we don't roll into the game and then we're the coach in the timeout or at halftime and we're not, we're taking terrible shots. It's like, well, maybe your team doesn't know what a great shot is first. So much of coaching, like, okay, I love the fact that you said playing coach. I've never heard that before, but been there, done that. I've observed it many times. Playing coach is something goes wrong, in this case, shot selection. It could be our body language. It could be the way a player gets coached at practice or during a game. And we get upset and we yell and scream because we just assume they know what the standard is or what the right way to do something is. But if we've never set that standard before, you're playing coach. You're showing up for the game, expecting everything to go great. When it doesn't, we have no plan. We haven't equipped our players to handle that adversity. So yeah, just intentionality, I think, is the difference between coaching and playing coach. I'm going to steal the phrase playing coach. Thank you.
I stole it or borrowed it, and I'm drawing a blank on who, and that happens quite a bit with these talks. They blur together, but thankfully some of the things jump out. But years ago, we all have our playing coach moments, and you're right on the money. I think if you're having to address something as serious as shot selection in the moment, then the answer is time machine. You go back to day one. Shot selection's day one at Grapevine Faith Christian School before quote unquote culture. But that's where the definition of culture has to shift. It's not these words that you say. It's everything that you do. It's how you literally show up every day. It's how you train. It's how you talk. It's how your locker room is. It's how shot selection is. It's all of these things together, and it's done by thousands of little conversations. And one of my favorite parts from Ted Lasso, third season, I think season 1's the best. 2, they start declining, and then 3 is just awful until Total Football comes back around and they completely redeem themselves, because I think that's what we're talking about here is total basketball. But the reporter, Trent, who has just been kind of getting on board, he says, this is going to work. And Ted Lasso's like, why do you say that? He's like, because of the Ted Lasso effect. He says, all the thousands of little conversations you've had over the last few years. And that's what culture is. It's not, I love activities. IUE talks that I took from PGC is some of our strongest moments, maybe to reshape, refocus, or just catapult it even farther. It does that, but it's not a standalone. And I just completely lost it. But that whole playing coach. So years ago, I used to say, that's not it. That's not it. Again and again, in the middle of the game, yelling, that's not it. What am I saying that for? Am I just trying to tell my players that they're really not doing that? Or am I telling the parents that that's not how I coach them, so don't get mad at me when it doesn't work out? Completely just playing coach. And thankfully, I had a player that had the courage. And I think something you said years ago of what questions I should ask them after the season is over. Shawnee Harley challenged me with another question of how can I be better for you? She also said, what's something I should ask players, what's something that I say to you that you don't want me to say anymore? Oof. Like, you got to better have some courage as a coach to ask that question. But a kid came up to me and said, Coach, I really don't like when you yell, that's not it. And, I mean, I didn't even think about it, but it's one of those block out. Oh, wow. Well, okay. If that's the first time you're talking about blockouts, then you're in trouble already. Nothing you say will matter. Same thing with culture breakers happening in games. But yeah, playing coach, that's a goal of mine, is to not do that.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I love that. I love that you mentioned Ted Lasso too. Completely agree on the seasons. I have heard season 4 is going to be a thing. I don't know if that's true.
If it's about Beard and him maybe growing in his Ted Lasso-ness, I'm on board. If it's the manager, that weird deal. The manager becomes the head coach, and then he comes back like, well,
then he's anyway, the villain, and then
like, man, what a shift. I remember watching my wife going like, why is he so angry? This dude take him from a water boy to, like, he's listening to him. Like, where's the gratitude, man? Like, oh
yeah. I think the in the lesson there was how you make your players feel. You know, like they say, perception is reality. His perception was reality. So, like you saying, like, that's not it. It's like, well, I might not even be talking to that player, right? It makes that other player feel really uncomfortable. So we shouldn't do it, right? Or we should adjust our approach, find a better way. I love that you got that from asking, what should I not say? Or how do you not want me to coach you? That's really, really good. I'll share my that's not it story. And this has to do with kind of our style of play shift, but I would have consistent one-on-one meetings with our players, but the big one was always at the end of the season, where they just felt a little bit more open, unleashed to share feedback. And there was this one player, his name was Chandler, and he was a talented player. We disagreed on some things, right? Chandler was a unique kid and pushed the he would never go over the line, but he liked to step on it a little bit. But nothing bad, just, you know, it's just one of those things where, like, you had the coach Chandler, and really high basketball IQ, really, really good kid, loved his family. And he gave me some great feedback at the end of the season. We're sitting in the coach's office. We're going through our Google Doc. I think you should send a Google Doc, Google form before you do any one-on-one meeting. Let them have time to think about their answers. You get their answers in advance. But his feedback to me was, Coach, you know, I feel like we start the year playing really fast, shooting a lot of threes. We switch a lot of things defensively, and we usually start out really strong. And as the year goes on, I feel like we play slower, we shoot less threes, we make more defensive adjustments as the year, and I feel like we kind of lose our steam. And my initial response was like, I'm about to jump across this table. How dare this kid tell me how to be better at my job? I'm the coach, you know? But for, 3 seconds, I just stood back and I just said, gosh, everything he's saying, I have felt myself, but I didn't emotionally attached, right? I didn't want to come to grips with it. So I just said, Chandler, I think you're kind of right. And I felt that too, but I haven't had the courage to really go all in. I welcome that feedback. Thank you. And that was honestly one of the big turning points in my coaching journey. I remember calling a friend and I was just like, man, next year we're switching everything. We're playing fast. We're shooting a lot of threes. And he was like, why? And I'm like, can you give me a good reason why not? Like you said, the goal is to create a great shot as fast as you can. Like, why would we not try to do that in transition? And why would we not hold to that as the season goes on, through the good, through the bad? If you're not holding on to your beliefs and your philosophy through good and bad, it is not your identity. Not to say you can't make adjustments. I think your principles of play, your philosophy should remain the same. The steps, the tweaks, the adjustments throughout the season is intentional coaching, but it should be to still get the end result. Your vision as the head coach, you might have to make adjustments along the way. A plane, when it's in the air, they say it's off track like 90% of the time. So the pilot's job is just to nudge it right back on track constantly. That is your job as the coach. You'll never cast this vision and you just like automatically get there. That wouldn't be fun either, right? Like Ted Lasso, right? He had this awesome vision, but a whole lot of adversity, and he had to come up with a suggestion box. He had to figure out how to coach his most difficult players and manage the roster and manage his coaching staff and all those things, what makes an expert coach. So think of it this way. You are the bumpers on the bowling alley, right? And you should expect things to go off course and expect to hit some adversity. A master coach can always should work to get it back down the middle of the alley.
Are you ready to level up your team skill development? Well, Bology is here to support you in driving accountability and skill development. The Bology app is more than just tracking. It's a resource for enhancing skills, knowledge, and mindset across your program. Join coaches all across the country using Bology to simplify training and empower your athletes. Let's build consistency, accountability, and skill development together.
Man, a lot of good things there. Adjustments versus overhaul. And I think that's sometimes what pressing coaches get right. The ones that are sold, this guy, Kenny Hoffpower, anybody at DFW in Texas, they know that name. I learned his diamond press from a packet years ago, and then had a pleasure of getting to meet him a couple years ago. But he recently had some heart issues, had to have surgery, and he's group text, like call his coach, Coach, how are you? Coach, how are you? And he goes, still pressing, won't stop. That's the mentality of. But when talking with him and other coaches that, especially on that side of the ball, I think they get it. The danger of this is what we do, but against this opponent, we've got to do something different. Your players lose the confidence in what they're doing. We want them to feel, one coach said, comfortable and familiar with what they're doing, like train in a way over time that they're comfortable and familiar with everything that they're doing on the floor. And that little nugget right there made so much sense, because I'm like, when you can see a player sticks out like a sore thumb when there's a lack of, I have no clue what I'm doing right now, or they're just running around, or they're in the way, or they look lost. So we have to coach in a way that creates those two things. And like you said from the very beginning, probably live play gets us there in practice more than on air, because on air you can feel great and look great, but you and I both know it all changes when you put human beings out there. So, but going back to that idea of whatever your concepts are, and that's what I loved about your ideas with flow and with shooting, adjusting those depending on who you play, but not saying now different identity, something else. We can run a gun against these teams, but not this team. And then at the end of the day, being okay, like I don't know what coach said this years ago, but have a style of play that you're comfortable losing in, that you're okay to lose this way. With flow, the way we run a gun, I'm 100% okay with that. To the point where if we lose to a team that is bigger, faster, stronger, more skilled, coaches will ask me, what do you do against that? Well, we might lose. There's a really good chance, but we're going to give it our very, very best, and we're not going to deviate. How we guard the post, how we guard off-ball actions, that might change. But man, offensively, if we play against pack line, we may have to move it more than just attacking those initial gaps when they're there, because even though our spacing is right, their bodies are in the way. So we may have to pass and actually move players even farther. But I think the danger, and a lot of coaches, I've felt it before, is, man, this isn't looking good. What do we need to do? Okay, guys, today, brand new offense. At that point, I feel like our credibility and the confidence of the entire team, man, it really drops.
Yeah, it does. I think if you can stick with a system or your philosophy for a few years, right, there's going to be growing pain, action, struggle, patience. Your players at a certain point won't know another way. And that goes back to our shot selection and how we move the ball and how our players were bought in, is because after a while, they don't know a different way. They come in as freshmen, they learn this, and the senior, that by the time they're a senior, they have deep understanding of the system. They feel comfortable in it. They believe in it because they've seen it work. And then they're not wondering, well, what we did last year, I like better, right? And it's for you as a coach and the players, but especially as a coach, if you're constantly changing, it's always year one. And we never get the dividends. We never get the fruits of the labor of, like, we stuck with this. We've learned from year one to year two to year two to year three. So as a coach, you can now troubleshoot things if you stick with it, because, I've seen this before. I know exactly how to fix this, or some tools we can use. And you said, okay to lose that way. Completely agree. I think a lot of coaches think about, like, hey, how do I want to win? I would reshape it as, or reframe it as, how am I willing to lose? What's going to get me up in the morning, fired up? What are my players going to really enjoy? And we obviously at Savvy have our systems that we love. And I don't ever, as a consultant, convince somebody the way to play. Just like our initial conversation, you're like, coach, saw your film, or I forgot how we got connected, but you're like, man, I love it. It's similar to what we do. Tell me more. And I'm like, oh, great. Like, man, I would love to work with you.
Yeah, you didn't email me 30 times, and then I finally responded with, what?
Right. Yeah. And usually, I was lucky where people would reach out to me because they believed in it. They liked it. Something resonated with them. If that's the case, I'd love to show you what we do and how to do it. If it's not, keep doing what you're doing. But I think if anything that you got from our conversation today would be, think about how you do what you do. Can you be more intentional? Can you, create an environment where your players grow more and you invest more in your culture and all those things? Because you can run motion, you can run pack, you can run continuity offense, you can run that pressing system that you mentioned that coach runs, and you can win a championship. The value is really how you're doing that, how you're teaching your players, empowering your coaches, running your program on, off the floor. All those things are way more important than what you do anyway.
And I've always been, I think, inspired by those coaches or teachers that just have a level of conviction, the true belief in what they're teaching and what they're doing. Not to say that you can't change over time, or especially with the way maybe college basketball is. Greg Campy also, he said, you're not dealing with programs anymore. You're just dealing with teams. You're not building programs. You're building a team every year. And the challenges with that, maybe to a lesser extent at the high school level, if you can't have people come from your junior high, your ninth grade JV, all the way up, where you do have this sense of a program. There's an overarching theme that rolls all the way through.
The college level, you are building a team year to year, which has a whole nother set of challenges. It's the hardest probably environment to coach in right now with the transfer portal and all that stuff at the college level. But I think that's even more of a reason to be convicted in the way you coach and be selective about who fits your system, right? It should be for everybody. I think, and I was at the Division I level, and it's easy to get caught up in this player's talented. It's like, okay, but do they fit into what we do? Or do they respond to coaching the way we coach? Do they value those same things? one thing I've made a note of as far as just like values and stuff, you've mentioned like a shirt slogan or a hashtag. One thing I would encourage coaches to do is wait for that, right?
Mhm.
I think there's two ways to do it. I'll go with the first way. Wait on it. Go into your season. Right now you're in your off season, so maybe you have this. Maybe you're equipped to do this now, but what type of team have we been? Right? Like we've been a team that's like really resilient this off season. We've got kicked out of the gym for this, or we've got, a construction on campus, so we've had to lift outside because we don't have a weight, whatever it is, right? We've been really resilient. Well, then maybe that is the hashtag because we're already living that value. So I think that's one way to do it is who are you? And then can you go all in on that, which you're already doing? And the second thing would it be cast a vision, but have a really intentional process of bringing that vision to life. A vision is not a hashtag, right? We can't just throw it up on the wall or a shirt or on Twitter and say, this is who we are. I think that might even be worse than like not having any type of vision or any type of values, right? So if you do have this vision or that you want your team to embody or create this year, break that vision down into values and then create one standard for each value. And that's what you measure and that's what you live by. And then you can take those to the court. I know for a long time as a coach, we did the whole like culture thing in August and September. And then once we could roll the balls out, like, oh yeah. Like I couldn't even name our core values, right? As the head coach, because they were just ones that I thought were good because some coach that was successful used those in the past.
No, there's so much good things there. The t-shirts it was Shape when I started here because I was really heavy into the PGC stuff. So second year started directing with PGC, came back and just threw those 6 principles, which are great, onto my players. This is Shape. This is who we are. It's on our practice jersey. You see it. And it's on all these shirts. You see it. Like, this is who you are. And because I have nice guys that, I've been taught respect and yes, sir. And they would go with it, but there wasn't ownership to that. And so then a couple of years went by and then I took the word JAMODI, which you used the tagline. It's not what you do, but how you do what you do that's important. And I shoved that down. I gave each letter in JAMODI, and not just a matter of doing it, but I gave each letter something, and I shoved that down their throat. And then it just took me a long time. Maybe like Rick Torbett said, it takes you 10 years to figure out who you are as a coach, and maybe just or hearing the right people. But okay, I'm done with that. Done with slogans, done with quotes, done with this and that. Who are we? How do we actually try to show up every day? What are those words that surfaces in our minds? Ask your coaches, ask your players. And so we came up with some that like, this is actually who we are. This isn't just a gimmick or anything like that, or something that looks good. And it doesn't rhyme. They don't go in order. There's no acronym, all of that. But we can measure this. These are standards that in the moment, in a 43-minute workout, that if one of these are missing, we can correct and we can, like you just said with the plane, we can push it back straight. But the shirts, so I love having my guys have a lot of gear and they buy it. But I used to do these motto shirts and there'd be 5 or 6 motto shirts that would have things that I choose for the back, like quotes that I think are great that maybe my players don't care at all about. And then I think a good thing for us to do as coaches is to figure out what am I doing that I really don't care about that they can do. Like, let them do that. So you'll walk into our gym and you'll see 5 or 6 different mottos running around on these back of shirts. The players chose them. I don't even care because honestly, most of the time they don't care. They don't read what's on the back of their shirts. Maybe you see it, but you don't remember those things. But the vision that you're casting every day, that's really what we want. And you tied it back really great to what Tyler Costin talked about was the stakeholders in your program. It's not enough for us just to sell the vision to our players. We have to sell it to everybody else that is in their life, in their ear, that we want to have on board with that vision, whether it's your parent meeting or every bit of communication that you send out, you're setting those standards and you're selling that vision.
So all really good. And I always like to give practical tips for coaches to use because this is what we're here. We're here to learn. I'm learning from you. What team have we been, right? I used resilient earlier. So here's how to elect a captain. This always comes up. Coaches might be doing that at this point in the season. And one of the questions we ask, and we ask 3 questions to elect a captain. One of them is centered around our values. So if resiliency is our value, being resilient is the value, I would ask players, okay, what does that mean? Like, if you're resilient, what does that mean? They might write down like being adaptable, right? Or being optimistic, problem solving, staying level-headed, whatever it is, or perseverance. Okay, these are kind of behaviors of what resilient means. Who has been the most resilient this offseason? Rank them 1 through 10. And then do that for all of your core values. That would be one tool. That would be kind of one vote that they would get for being a captain. We asked 2 other questions, but I did want to tie what you were saying, because it was really, really good, about who have we been, who are we? Use who are we, of who's doing it the absolute best. They should get a nod to be the captain, not the senior, not the popularity contest. And I think when you ask it that way, it removes the popularity. If you just say, hey, who should be our captain? It's usually best player or most popular. If you ask it according to the values, I think you get a truer gauge of where you're.
It's good. If I was a coach kind of listening to what you're saying, and it all sounds good, and I want to make some strides or changes to maybe having better processes. And then we're talking about vision, the stakeholders, maybe that parent meeting. And one thing that's been helpful for me as a coach that runs a free-flowing system, where over the years you start to see trends and patterns. Even though you got different players, you can see when light bulb moments have typically come on with your teams. Like Eric Spoelstra said, it when they first start playing, it feels like this inside, but then they can slow down their breathe, their thinking, their talking while it stays fast. Like the game slows down for them. So I think something helpful can be for us is to be a little bit, play prophet. Say something to them that could happen. I think so many times at these vision parent meetings, we talk about this utopia, this perfect scenario where our culture is going to be great. We're all going to love each other. There's going to be no issues. Greg Campy said there's 3 to 4 issues every year that's going to happen outside of the court, that how you deal with that actually sets up the level of success your team is going to have. Nothing to do with basketball. So at these meetings, I usually talk about as far as style of play. Parents, at the very beginning, turnovers are going to be really high. They're going to be really high, and I'm okay with that. You need to be okay with that, because we are experimenting, we are learning, we're growing how do we play fast but still under control, which is that fine line that we're trying to be on that most teams will never get on. And I don't tell them this, but I think most teams never get on that line because of us, because of me. I either force them to play under control, which slows them down and doesn't allow them to take chances, or I force them to play out of control with no constraints, and then it's just a free-for-all. So how do we get on that line? It takes time. And then the second one is our shooting percentage is going to be really low. I don't tell them that I don't track that. I don't really care about that. I care more about attempts, because attempts to me show that the level of pace and spacing that we want is happening. But I tell them those things, and parents, I don't know what time, but late November, maybe early December, that it's going to flip. And how do I know that? We've been doing this for a long time, and it'll happen for these guys as well. But what I need you to do, parents, is just enjoy it. Like, get on board with this ride that we're going to be on. And when we miss 8 threes in a row, but they're the right shots, and I'm clapping, keep pulling it, I need you to do that too. But you let them know, and you let your players know. I think by letting your players know this, you almost take that pressure off of them to have it look good or be perfect at the very beginning. And then you could go into culture 2 with excellence, how perfection's never the goal, but we can pursue excellence even while we're failing. But I think maybe turning into a prophet in a way, letting them know what is about to happen on the bad side, but that it's okay and that we're going to come out the other side, that may keep you away from a few parent meetings, maybe.
Yeah. And just regarding like the entire parent meeting, like you were saying, I think being transparent, proactive, playing prophet, right, is a great way to get buy-in from your parents. Because if you're, like, I love how you said utopia, like we're creating this utopia, it's going to be this perfect year. You'll always have adversity, and you can't run from adversity. just because that parent is no longer associated with the program, or this player that was difficult graduated, or this group just didn't gel well together and they're not here anymore, or whatever it is, you're always going to have problems. And if you like solving problems, you should be a coach, because that's all you do is just constantly solve problems. So I think, yeah, being really proactive with parents and saying, these are some ways, this is what you're going to see, maybe some ways that we're going to struggle. We're going to make mistakes as coaches. We're committed to correcting those mistakes. We need your help, parents, in this. You know, parents are the biggest influence on their son or daughter. It's the reason why they're at your school. They're going to spend more time with them than anyone else outside of you. So we might as well partner and do it together. And I found the more proactive, the more transparent I was with parents, they really appreciated that. One part of adversity you will always have in your season is playing time. So I would be very direct and transparent. And it might not be, well, here's who's going to play, is, hey, there's a scarce amount of minutes. We're going to make mistakes. Rarely does playing time go the way we would like to script it during the game. Here's how we determine playing time. That way they know, and they know, why you're making your decisions, how you're making your decisions. Just anything you can do to communicate with your parents goes a long way.
So good. And let's remind them too, that level of care for their son, their daughter, their player doesn't mean like higher level of care means higher level of playing time. Lower level of care means lower level of playing time. Those two things aren't they don't connect. We can care about all of them, and we will care about all of them despite their playing time. But I like to kind of put it a little bit more on them too, with that of, like, it's up to you guys to make sure, or Shaka Smart said, does our relationship depend on your playing time? It shouldn't. So parents, listen, if I'm developing your son, here's what I can promise. And we got to be able to promise this, but be real about it, that every player will be developed every day, off the court for sure, but also with their skill. Because as much as we think that they care about the culture piece, or even at Grapevine Faith, that they're being discipled in a way that helps their relationship with the Lord grow. I would love to think that that's the most important thing, but I had a parent tell me one time it's not. He said, I would rather my son play more than the discipleship piece. Like, at least he was real about that. But I think we need to make sure that they know that how they deal with their playing time, or how they feel about that shouldn't affect our relationship. But what I can promise them is development. And that's where we got to go back to our workouts and practice plans. And how much is it our starting five dominating everything that we do? Is there a skill component time? Like, I don't know what the percentage is, but I still feel like it should be 50% of individual skill work, even throughout the season, where typically that number drastically shifts, so that I can look parents and players in the eye and say, even if you're not on the court, you're still being developed. You're still going to improve and get better, and you have an opportunity every day to compete for time. I don't have things set in stone. You got to be honest, because you got to be honest with that, and not just say it, but then your players know, I barely touched the ball today. Heck no. Like, you're going to get better.
Yeah. I think, gosh, I forgot where I heard this, but I always loved this, and I always wanted it to be what my program stood for, was it's impossible to be part of this program and not get better, whether it's on or off the court, right? And I've worked at places where just being there, you got better because you're around really good people that have high standards and they worked really hard. It's just like this absorbed improvement, just you can't hang around high achievers and not have something rub off on you in some kind of way. And I wanted to be that for my players, and I wanted just our program to be that for all of our stakeholders involved.
That's really good. That we used to call it the factory. On Thursdays here, because it's chapel day, we would only have about 34 minutes. And so I'd set about 10 different stations out, and some of them would just be kind of fun. Like, we have this laser machine that's like Guitar Hero for your handle, so you can get in front of it, and every time it moves, you got to do a different thing. If anybody's ever seen that work before, and Curtis, the guy that runs it, is awesome, it's rare to see the level of focus in ball handling. than what you see with that machine. And it's fun, but we'll have that going, we'll have the gun, we'll have all these different stations going. And the whole idea was, guys, this is the factory. Like, you will leave different. You will not stay the same. But I think that idea that it's left maybe just Thursdays, but to every day. And then a whole idea, a culture idea of glad to be here. The Blue Angels, I just watched this documentary a few days ago, and I think it's going to be something that maybe I watch with my team if we do like a lock-in or something, or maybe parts of it. But I never knew the amount of focus and training and how serious that whole Blue Angels thing is with the Air Force or the Navy, and incredible the team and the way that they do their meeting. I'm telling you, Coach, have you seen it?
I haven't. I'm interested.
Oh, watch it today. It's on Amazon Prime for free. But the level that they practice, the film that they watch, the way they communicate in their team meetings, it's all gold for what we do. But they have this huge piece that says, glad to be here. You ask anybody on their 144-person staff at any given time, I'm so-and-so, I do this, man, I'm glad to be here. That statement right there, it transcends how you feel. It transcends your playing time. It transcends your win-loss record. But I feel like that's a big part of what we have to do as coaches, is create the environment where we're glad to be here. How many guys walk into their job every day frustrated and wishing that they had different players, different facilities, different parents, different districts, different all this, but instead, man, glad to be here. What a great shift right there in our mindset.
Yeah, I love it, man. Make the big time where you're at, You're lucky to be able to coach every day, and the grass is greener where you water it. So, and that's like the Blue Angels documentary. I would absolutely watch that with our team. I loved taking things that were non-basketball related and just finding a way to blend it with like our vision or our standard, our slogan, whatever, that we were talking about earlier. It's like, can we find different ways and creative ways to communicate it? Because that stuff becomes really sticky. Like, so for glad to be here, maybe your value, one of your core values is gratitude. It's so like, how do we show gratitude? What's our standard is we show up being glad to be here. Okay. That's like the first step. We've identified something, but what does being glad to be here look like, right? It means saying yes, sir, no, sir, or smiling, or open the door for your teammate, or our body language when we come to the gym, how we respond to coaching, how we give feedback to our teammates, right? Like, all of that is how we show how we're glad to be here. So yeah, I think taking something non-basketball related, bringing it into your culture, then bringing it on the court, that's what coaching is, man. That's honestly, so I do this full time now. I consult and help coaches have their best season yet. I miss more of that stuff. Like, I'm going to watch this Blue Angel documentary and be like, gosh, I don't have a team to watch this with. That's the stuff that I miss about coaching.
Man, that's good. And I think what you just said about even how we implement our culture, I think is really huge, because again, we could say, hey, one meeting, here are 5 pieces. All right, let's go practice. Let's go work. And then maybe we do our very, very best to say a quote at the beginning of our workouts or whatever it is. I think TJ Rosine at Emmanuel is one of the best of having that feel for knowing, or eyes up for seeing a culture moment that's embedded. It's in the practice. It's happening right before us. It can be a kid misses a shot that we know he has to take, not make, and a senior coming over and saying, hey, that's it. That's the right one. And don't let that go by. Pause your practice plan, adjust your time, and hit that culture moment. I've seen him do it, and I've heard he's one of the best. But not just saying the words, but how do we apply this? How does it actually show up? And so for us, it's in a few areas. One is defining it, defining what the word is. So, because you could say humility, but do our players really know what that is, what that looks like? And then not just me telling them, and then start with a popcorn style within your team. How does this show up on the floor when we're working out? Like, take the different places where they're going to be. How does humility show up on the floor throughout practice? Coach, if I lose a game, if my team loses a game, I'm not going to be pissed off. I'm going to give those guys we just competed against a high five. We're going to do whatever we have to do, and we're going to be ready to play again. or if we win. So you could take that so many. We talk about all of our standards with your faith. Like, how does this show up with your faith? If that truly is more important, if we say that our culture is about something bigger than basketball, how are we connecting it to something bigger than basketball? Or is it just really all about what we do on the floor? And then our program across the board, like in our school, what as basketball players here, what does it look like to have humility or excellence or toughness? And so I think you're right on the money. And then when you just define those, then you got to talk about, in my opinion, the culture breakers. Because instead of, like you said, like we talked about that perfect scenario, guys, where this is our culture, everything's going to be great, everything is awesome, like in Lego Movie. Instead of that, it's going to break. We all know it. It's just a matter of when. Like Doug Novak said, we talk about losing first. How are we going to lose? Like if and when we do. So the culture breakers, like Shawnee says, we'll take a day after we've set everything else, which takes weeks. We set a day and we start to list, all right, how is excellence going to screw up? Coach, probably when I bring the wrong thing to practice to wear. That's probably a way. We start to go through all the ways it's going to break. Yeah, that's going to happen. What are we going to do when that happens? How are we going to handle that? How's humility going to show up in a negative way, or the lack of? Well, Coach, if somebody in the locker room after a loss is talking about how many points they had, man, yeah, I get that. That's tough. That's tough to hear, tough to be around. How are we going to address that as a team? Are we going to let it go? We're just going to get mad, let it fester? Or are we going to talk one-on-one with? So you start to have all the breakers set up. To me, the breakers list becomes even more important than the list of how everything's going to work out great.
I love that. Culture breakers. I'm going to start using that.
That's Shawnee Arley, who Tyler turned me on to. I never ask anybody. They should go listen to your episode for sure. Tyler's 2 episodes are great. With Shawnee, I just thought I was paying for therapy. Like, I needed to pay her after. Like, thank you for that. I'm sorry for crying during, no, but she's incredible. Winning matters. Tyler turned me on to her, and yeah, big time.
I love that. Also, you mentioned TJ. He's great of highlighting the good, not missing that moment. I think area of growth for all coaches, no matter where you are, first-year coach, 30-year coach, championship coach, still trying to figure it out, whatever it is, look for the good. If you look for the bad, you'll find it. If you look for the good, you'll find it. I think you get a lot better results by highlighting the good. I know for a long time I coached with like a good play. I'm like, yeah, that's what we're supposed to do. Bad play, oh, now I need to go fix that, right? Like that's what coaching is. But I think coaching is just as much highlighting the good. In fact, I would even look for like a 2-to-1, 3-to-1 ratio of how much we reward the good versus punish or correct the bad.
Man, that's good. Really good, Coach. And we talked a little bit about maybe what are some ways that we can test really where our culture is. I think you can really test what a coach is all about by asking them what they saw. And do they immediately rattle off golly, didn't guard worth crap, didn't block out anybody, shot the ball horribly, right? Like, I think that's a good test. I think the challenge for all of us would be, and even when talking with each other, is what good we saw. But what's the balance there, though? Let's just say you're talking with your staff, because I've been guilty of after practices of saying, hey, guys, what good things did you see today? Because I typically do look for the good, optimist. And with this style of play, Coach, I don't know how you can't be an optimist, because we're always close to breaking through. We're always about to make a run. You miss a bunch of shots, what's about to happen? About to get hot. Like that's the feeling, or how we talk. But what's the balance between that, but then also being our number one fan, but our number one critic as well within our team?
Yeah, here's the balance. God, this is really good. One, okay, let's use after a loss, because you mentioned that earlier. Like, how do we handle a loss, or what's the post game? You kind of got rid of your post game talks. Completely agree. How would I handle this with my players or staff? Let's say we lose. All right, first, exactly what you did. What did we do well? Because even if we lose, there are some things that we did well, right? Second thing, what did I learn? Third, and this one's the most important, how do I apply what we learned going forward? And I forgot where I got this. This might have been like an email newsletter or something, but so can't give credit, but really good. Let's say we played really hard defensively is what we did well. What did we learn? Let's go with shot selection. We got to take better shots, right? How are we going to apply it going forward? We're going to be really intentional about our shot selection in practice. We're going to design constraints. We're going to formulate these games, whatever it is, conditions in practice. And then the most important piece is your next time that you have a really good shot selection game, connect that to your learning and your application. So remember when we played this team and our shot selection was not great and we lost, now look at our shot selection and we won. So I think that is the balance of, we're going to be grateful, we're going to acknowledge the good things that we do, but we're always going to learn and then learn to apply it going forward.
Coaches, the JAMODI podcast is powered by Shoot 360. The future of basketball has arrived in Dallas-Fort Worth. Shoot 360 combines the latest sports technology with the fundamentals of basketball skill development. The result is a one-of-a-kind video game-like basketball program designed to improve your shooting, dribbling, and passing. Visit shoot360dfw.com to learn more and register for your free 1-hour workout evaluation. Shoot 360, the future of basketball is here.
I have 2 speed round questions that are new that you didn't do, years ago when we did it. So let's just get these in and then I'll get you out of here. Okay, first one is top 3 dinner guests that you'd like to have from any time period.
Gosh, good one. Let's go with Thomas Jefferson. I like history. Let's go with Pete Maravich because he's behind me. He's the one who got me into my love of basketball.
Same.
I'm going to refrain from just saying Jesus because I feel like, let's just go Jesus.
Can't. No, you can't. No, that's just like the favorite book. You can't do that. Those are off limits. He should have been, you already had your meal with him.
Yeah, okay. Got it. Thomas Jefferson, Pete Maravich, and just because he's been on my mind lately of how much the basketball world is going to miss him, I'll go Kobe Bryant.
That's good. It's good. Up 3 on defense with 5 seconds left. Do you foul or no foul?
Absolutely fouling. And I like that you would put a time there. I would say 6 or less seconds. We are fouling. Might not go with lightning round, but I'll throw this in really fast. Have a set philosophy. So my philosophy is we are fouling up 3. There could be something in the game that changes that, and maybe we adjust. But if I don't say anything, we don't have to have this long discussion as a coaching staff. Our players are aligned. Foul up 3.
This is a new one. As a coach on the sideline, do you sit or stand?
Usually stand. I try to be intentional about sitting, though.
What do you mean by that?
Not to overcoach, right? And to trust our preparation. I always intentionally set to start the game and just, what does our team have, right? Are we ready to play? Do they need me? I think as a head coach, your job is to become increasingly unnecessary. So if I can sit and our players play to our standards and play the way that we want to play, I don't need a stand and make it all about me. The playing coach, right?
That's it. That's what I was going to say.
Come on.
That is such a sign.
We don't need
a sign. If we had like a bingo card for what's playing coach, that's one of them. And I feel like I've done that so many times. Steve Kerr also talked about he stands and sits at random times so that there's never a way you could read into it. Because what I think a good thing for coaches to do, and sorry I'm taking more time, but is watch themselves on film. What makes you slump your shoulders? What makes you? I don't get mad at a guy missing a wide open shot, but sometimes I slump my shoulders and I sit down. That is a sign that I'm frustrated the fact that he didn't make it. So yeah, I'm not saying anything that goes against our culture, but more is caught than taught anyway.
Yeah. Watch yourself on film and say, hey, do I look glad to be here? Or do I look resilient, right? And then take it one step further. Coaches, at least a practice or at least one game this year, mic yourself up and do an evaluation on how intentional your feedback is, or what is your ratio to positive to negative comments? How do you talk to your players? How do you talk to yourself, right? That would be one step further than just looking at yourself on film. Mic yourself up.
Coach, round 2, just as awesome as round 1. And I think we probably got into even some deeper things here. It is fun when I don't have the questions set up and we can just kind of flow through. But that also means, to me, that when there's a little bit of relationship there, it's nice when they're like-minded, but that it's able to happen. But man, just really appreciate you, what you're doing with Savvy now, how you're helping coaches, and by indirectly through that, helping their players. So, man, just really appreciate you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. This is absolutely my pleasure. I love helping coaches have their best season yet. If a coach got one thing from this was time well spent, and I actually learned a bunch from you. So I'm coming out winning as well. So thanks so much for having us. I would say one thing, if you're listening to the podcast, feel free to reach out and to join our community. We have a free community with over 1,400 coaches in there where we share resources, a lot of great engagement. So if you're interested in learning more about Savvy, that'd be the first step.
Just connecting with you or doing that, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, so if you go to, it's school.com, SKOOL.com/Savvy Coaching. That'll take you right to our community. You can join for free and you can hop right in.
Awesome. Thanks, man, for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This was great.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.